Arriving home from work earlier than usual, the man saw his wife tying up her stepdaughter in the barn and taking the men there. The tall grass, which reached the woman's waist, swayed slowly in the quiet wind. Spikes that bumped against each other faintly made a pleasant snapping sound, as if the field was talking. The woman walked over to the cow that was grazing near the field. She removed a rope from a nailed hook and led her home. The cow slowly waddled from foot to foot behind her mistress, looking around. Evening was descending, and everything around was colored in scarlet, orange, and then lilac hues. It was so beautiful and quiet here. Someone out there, far away in the field, was taking a skinny mare out of the pasture, and a little foal, diligently raising not yet firm legs, trudged after. Anita led the cow, holding the rope with one hand and the long hem of her thin dress with the other. Unlike the cow, she did not look around. She was in a disgusted mood, and all the beauty that was going on around her went unnoticed. She groaned heavily, falling into a groove she had forgotten about. The cow stopped and mooed for some reason. She snarled at the cow, barked, and got back on the normal trail. She looked back, and the fact that the cow had crossed the groove and she hadn't made her mood even worse. Anita walked into the big yard, untied the cow, and slapped it lightly. It went to her own stall, where fodder, a bucket of water, and a pile of fresh hay with fragrant alfalfa were waiting for it. Anita walked toward the house, feeling her legs fall off. She cast a nervous glance at the girl who was feeding the chickens, and her anger increased. The girl was afraid to go after the cow, and she was not afraid to feed the chickens. Anita sat down on the bench because she felt that she could not cope with the influx of such emotions. She couldn't stand the girl who had so suddenly become her stepdaughter. If her husband had told her earlier that he had a daughter, Anita would have thought a good 100 times before agreeing to the marriage. And they had been so happy until this girl came along. On the other hand, Anita felt sorry for the unnecessary child. Her mother had dumped her on her father. Her father had grudgingly accepted. Now and then, she snatched a good slap from her stepmother. She wanted her own children. She didn't want her husband's children. She got up from the bench and went into the kitchen. The girl did everything, cleaned the whole house, even cut the salad and put the soup to boil. But no matter how hard Sophia tried, Anita still couldn't stand her. She even chased the housekeeper away so that Sophia would have more responsibilities. Anita kept waiting for the girl to beg back, that she would start begging to her mother. But Sophia did everything she was told except the cows. Her relationship with the cows did not work out, and that annoyed Anita even more. The girl entered the house and quietly slipped past the kitchen to hide in her room so as not to annoy her stepmother. Anita sat at the table with her hand on her head, just thinking about how she could get rid of the girl. Anita didn't want to accept other people's children. She wanted babies of her own, but her husband refused, arguing that he already had 2 daughters. One was already 20, and the youngest was 12. There was the barking of a dog and the sound of a gate opening. The man entered the yard, shook off his pant leg, rubbed the tethered dog behind the ear, and walked toward the house. The girl came down from the 2nd floor in a jiffy and rushed into her father's arms. He hugged her without seeing his wife standing in the door jamb with her sleeves rolled up. She had her arms crossed over her chest, watching with disdain as he cradled his daughter in his arms. Whether she was jealous was something she tried not to think about, though she knew the answer was yes. She had not taken him out of the family so that he also brought his daughter with him. Anita walked along the kitchen and returned to the table where she had been sitting. Her mood dropped much lower again. The man sat down at the table. The girl only served herself a full plate, put a mug of tea and a handful of sweets on the tray as well, and went off to her room. At least that fact gave Anita some satisfaction. The girl's desire to eat and watch something at the same time was just right. The woman sat down opposite her husband, smiled at him, and put her palm on his hand. He smiled at her too. He was so grown up. Hard work had only aged him. He was 40 years old now, and she was only 30. The 10-year difference in communication was not felt, but from the outside it was very noticeable. Anita sat on her husband's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. She kissed him, and he immediately switched from dinner to her. He took her in his arms and carried her to the bedroom, where they indulged in lovemaking. It was later that they went down to the kitchen to satisfy their hunger. The woman sat down across from him again, daring to have a frank conversation. "Listen, William, let's give the girl back, eh? How long is she going to hang around here? She's a stranger here," said Anita, trying to remain as calm as possible. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath in and out, which only gave away some of her nervousness. She opened her eyes and spoke again. "Well, really, William, we just got married. I've been waiting for this moment for 2 years, and you give me her as a lousy kitten in a box. Like, take her and coddle her. I want to be your wife, not your babysitter. Why doesn't your ex-wife want her? It's her baby," Anita said indignantly, throwing her hands up. Despite her emotionality, she tried to speak as quietly as possible. "Anita, there's no other option right now. It's true. The ex doesn't want to because she has a new life there. A new relationship. She's pregnant, so she wants to start from scratch. You think I'm glad I got her? Not really, I'll tell you that. But she's my daughter. I should be responsible for her. Patrick, when he married Lily from next door, she had 2 kids, and nothing. They live together. Anyway, you know what they say. There are no other people's children," said William. He began to eat and shut up. But she noticed how he wrinkled his forehead, how he frowned his eyebrows. He was mentally choosing words to speak later, and he only used the food to justify the pause. He spoke again. "There are no other people's children, I'm telling you again. I grew up without a father too. My mother married a second time, and a man took me in and raised me as his own. Anyway, that's some strange logic you broads have. You whine that a man should accept a woman with a child, but a woman doesn't have to accept a man with a child? I'm not happy about this situation myself, I'm telling you again, but nothing can be fixed now." "William, this phrase about other people's children is getting on my nerves. I'd had enough." She pointed to her throat with the edge of her hand, demonstrating how much she was tired of this expression. "Don't make everyone equal. When you left the family and asked me to marry you, you didn't say a word about a daughter. If I had known, maybe I wouldn't have said yes. I want to live with you. I want to have children together. I want to have a son with you. And I want us to live as a family without any other girls. I'll get rid of her sooner or later anyway. She'll ask to go home on her own, you'll see. Anita said, pounding the table with her fist. She went into the bedroom, and the man remained sitting and eating. This was not the first time he had heard this conversation, but it did not make him feel any better. He was just tired of hearing it all, tired of constantly telling his wife that she couldn't always get what she wanted, that no one else wanted the girl. But to be frank, he didn't really need her himself. He sat at the table, his head propped on his palm, and thought about how this situation could be resolved. There was no way the ex-wife would agree to the girl's return because she had a new husband, a pregnancy, a new life, and the girl didn't fit into that picture in any way. It's a strange thing. They were so much looking forward to this baby when they were together. And in the end, it turned out that nobody wanted Sophia. The man shook his head dejectedly. He felt frustrated, even confused in a way. Anita was crying in the living room. The girl could not be heard at all, only the muttering of her laptop. And what he should do, William did not know. He fervently adored Anita, her youth, the curves of her body, her beauty, and at times a cool temper, her vivacity in bed, and the light in her eyes. And he gave up his family to be with her because he was afraid someone would steal her away. She was too beautiful. Her body was too inviting. But he couldn't leave his daughter either, because she was still related to him. This dilemma was emotionally eating him up from the inside. The man closed his eyes in search of an answer, but there was no answer. Early in the morning, William left for work, kissing his wife. He took his daughter to school, and Anita was left alone in the house. She watched them walk away, and a contemptuous smirk flashed across her face. She cast a glance at the neighbor's lot and smelled the aroma of jam. Apparently, the neighbor had already taken to making jam for the winter. But suddenly, nausea came to her throat, and Anita rushed to the bathroom. She vomited, and then again. She sat on the bathroom floor with her head against the cold tub, and she knew exactly what was going on. She was happy, for the long-awaited pregnancy had arrived. But one thing still frustrated her. The girl was still living with them. Anita took 3 pregnancy tests out of the medicine cabinet, and they were all positive. In the blink of an eye, Anita felt her mood only get worse. She frustratedly walked into the kitchen and sat at the table, closing her eyes. What to do next? She is pregnant. William would go crazy with happiness, but she wanted the 3 of them to live together now. Just her, William, and the future baby. A girl didn't fit into the picture of a happy family. Anita was busy with household chores, and then a brilliant idea popped into her head. She thought of a way to bring the girl to such a state that she begged to come home. Anita pulled herself together and walked to the alley, where there were always men waiting for physical work. They all looked unkempt, the lingering smell of weathered alcohol emanating from them. She offered to do something for them, and they agreed. Anita went home, and they followed like a flock of geese following their mother goose. Anita set them down under the apple tree behind the house to wait there. Sophia was walking home an hour early because class had been canceled. She entered the yard, but immediately felt her stepmother's hands on her shoulders. "Come, I need you to help me," she said, taking the girl into the barn. Anita did not see that William was already home earlier than usual and noticed the strange situation from the side. William stopped. To his horror, he saw his life tying her stepdaughter in the barn, gagging her with some rag. "Now, you're going to hell, and then you're going to run to Daddy and whine that you want to go home until he takes you back to your mother. And if you refuse or aren't diligent enough, I'll repeat the experiment," Anita said, tightening the ropes tighter. She walked away and then led the men into the barn and out herself. William ran home unaware of himself with horror. Anita turned white with horror, realizing that he had seen everything. The man pushed her away, burst into the barn, and a scuffle ensued. Eventually, he drove all the men out of the yard, who left the area with battered faces. Anita stood in the yard, watching the events take place. She only clapped her eyes and said nothing. She could hear the girl crying hysterically as the man soothed her. But here, William came out of the barn and began to scream. Anita could barely make out any of the screaming. "I would have stopped everything. I was watching her. I just wanted to scare her. I wanted her to go away because I'm pregnant," the woman roared, and her face immediately flooded with tears. William could not look at her crying. He turned away so as not to upset himself further. He heard her crying and felt his heart clench with pain. He told his daughter to pack her things and went to pack himself. He couldn't stay here. Couldn't think about what his wife had done. Soon, Anita stopped crying. She just sat in the living room and watched her husband pack. She did not cry, but tears flowed quietly down her cheeks, and the sight made him feel even worse. He heard her words, heard that she was pregnant, but that in no way begged for her action. He thought of his wife, his child, his daughter, and he didn't understand how to resolve this situation. He was a man. He had to think of something. But nothing came to mind. The man and his daughter went to the car. There was a distinctive sound, and then they drove out of the yard, leaving his wife alone. Anita stopped crying almost immediately. She knew he would come back. She knew he couldn't resist her. It was only a matter of time before he returned. She closed the gate, turned the key in the gate, and went into the field to fetch the cow. She could only live her usual life and wait. But she could not wait too long either. Exactly until the moment when it would no longer be possible to have an abortion. Because if the plan failed, she was not going to raise the child alone. A man was driving down the road, and it was getting dark all around. He left the village and drove toward town. The girl was silent, and he did not say a word either. And what was there to talk about at all after such a thing? William could see how his vision was getting worse at dusk, but it was only 6 kilometers to the city. He drove under the bright lights of the city, and visibility got better. Traffic had already cleared, and the roads were clear. He turned and stopped at one of the apartment buildings in a residential neighborhood. The man had called a friend beforehand. He agreed to receive him when he learned of the whole situation. William opened his daughter's door, and she came out holding her backpack. He stepped into the entryway. She quietly scooted in after him. They got into an apartment that was smoky. Not the best option for a 12-year-old girl, but they had nowhere else to go. "It's just for a couple of days. Tomorrow I'll be looking for another option," he told his daughter. She nodded and went to the room the man had escorted her to. "This was my daughter's. She's all grown up now and moved out, so you can use whatever you want," her father's friend smiled. Sophia remembered him. He never hurt her and was always kind. Edward led his friend into the kitchen, took out a cold bottle of beer, and sliced sausage and cheese on a plate. They sat down at the table, and a conversation ensued. Of course your Anita is a fool, but I don't blame her, frankly. I saw her. You should be glad that she chose someone like you. With her looks, she could have married a rich guy. And then there's the pregnancy. Hormones make a woman go crazy. My wife ate watermelon with salted bread, and your ex, as I recall, kicked you out of the house every other day and then sobbed on her knees. So I don't think you can take that seriously. So she did something stupid. So what now? She kept telling me every day to give Sophia back to her mother. She said she wanted her own family and a child together. What was I supposed to do? I was between the hammer and the anvil. I want to stay with Anita. And Sophia, I cannot leave. She is all alone. The girl is not to blame that her parents were so good for nothing. And now I sit and think that Anita was right to some extent. I basically lied to her. She says that if she knew about my daughter, she would not have agreed to marry me. I really did not say anything. I put it to the fact, said William sadly again. He took a sip and felt the cold, foamy drink give him pleasure. He closed his eyes, exhaled noisily, and fell silent. He waited for his friend to speak, but he kept silent. Apparently, he let William finish speaking. William shook his head and continued. I'm not a fool either, and I understand perfectly well that I have experienced good luck when she agreed to be with me. But I'm not a fool to take for granted. And now, it tears me up inside when I think about her finding another man. You should know what she's like. She's impossible to resist. A charmer. I can't get enough of her. Even now, I only think about her, even though I'm ashamed to be such a father. And there's nothing to be ashamed of, said Edward, taking out more ice-cold bottles that were starting to get sweaty. What have you got to be ashamed of? That's the way it's always been, for women to babysit. It's your ex-wife who should be ashamed that she abandoned her own daughter and dumped her on you. So give her back to her and go back to Anita. You'd have to be an idiot, William, to give up such a gorgeous woman. That's true. And your wife isn't going anywhere anyway. A mother's instinct, so to speak. So she'll bring her up. You put her in front of the fact and that's it. Tell her that you don't have to take responsibility for her being a bad mother. It's the last straw for them. It's a massive attack. There's feelings and hormones and guilt. She might yell at you, but she'll take the girl. There's your solution to all your problems. Go back to Anita, apologize, and that's it. You should have called me earlier. We would have solved everything long ago, said Edward. William nodded. He understood that Edward was right, and it all turned out so easy, and he had puzzled all this time, although he could have decided to do it himself long ago. The next morning, William gathered up his daughter, put her in the car, and they drove off. Sophia was silent. She heard her father and his friend talking and knew exactly what was waiting for her. She was thrown around like a kitten from house to house, but no one was willing to take her. She does everything that is asked for her, keeps silent, tries not to annoy anyone, but neither her own mother nor stepmother wanted to bother with her. William did not even look at his daughter. Her huge, sad eyes would have driven him mad. He would simply give up and not be able to give her up. But he made up his mind yesterday, and he had to do it. He entered the entryway, using his old key, and went to his ex-wife's apartment. Sophia followed him on the familiar steps. William knocked on the door, and in a minute a tall, shoulder-length man opened it for him. He grimaced and asked what he wanted. Then he called his wife to come to the door. The man himself stood behind her with his arms crossed over his chest. "Listen, I've been thinking lately. Take Sophia. I don't have to take responsibility for you being a bad mother," said William. "She's your daughter. You're a woman, so take responsibility for your offspring. And I just can't. I'm a man. It's none of my business," he said, crumpled. And while his ex-wife stood there with her mouth open in surprise, he left, leaving the girl with a small bag of things. Sophia wanted to go into the apartment, but her mother closed the door a little and looked at her new husband. He rolled his eyes, but immediately beckoned his wife into the other room. Sophia could hear that the conversation was far from pleasant. They were fighting. It was mostly the man fighting. Sophia walked into the kitchen and watched her father drive away. She felt her heart clench with pain. She had heard her mother's conversation with her stepfather and understood perfectly well what awaited her. "I do not want to live with her. Don't you understand?" the man shouted. "She is your daughter by a strange man. Do I have to put up with her being here? What the hell do I need her for? And don't cross me. You're a normal woman who loves her husband and listens to him, which means it's only going to be like I said," he said so loudly that Sophia even flinched. Her mother's words were barely audible, but the man's shouting shook the walls. "So either you get rid of her and we stay together, or I pack my things right now and leave. So that's your choice. For a real woman, the man always comes first, and then the children. That's it. I'm done." Sophia's mother came out of the room with a crying face. She already had a rather large belly, which she was holding on to. She beckoned her daughter after her and told her to take her things with her. The woman went downstairs, got into her car, and soon the two of them were driving toward the orphanage. Sophia understood that everyone had given up on her now. She sat in the back seat and wiped away her tears. First, her mother abandoned her and left her in her father's care. Then, her father abandoned her. And now, her own mother wanted to put her in an orphanage just to please her new husband. What did she need her for? She would have a new baby, which meant the old ones could be abandoned like frayed clothes. The woman stopped outside the orphanage, handed the girl to the caregivers, and went to sort out the paperwork herself. Sophia stayed at the orphanage. For 2 weeks now, she has been cooped up alone, not wanting to talk to anyone. She could hear the teachers talking and whispering behind her back, now and then feeling sorry for her and saying that everyone rejected the girl. Sophia sat by the window and thought about her father, who was happy with his new wife, and about her mother, who was happy with her new husband, while she was left unneeded, just abandoned and forgotten by everyone. "Sophia, come downstairs. They're here to see you," said the nurse. Sophia shuddered. She stood up from the windowsill and froze. The caregiver climbed the stairs, smiled, and repeated what she had said again. Sophia ran down the stairs, hoping to see her father or mother come to their senses. But she was much happier when she saw her own sister. Sophia rushed into the arms of her sister, who cried. They stood there crying and hugging each other. "That's it, honey. Pack your things. All the papers are almost ready, and I can take you away. Not for a weekend like the other kids. I've almost got custody of you already," said Nancy. "Let's go home, because you have a home. If our parents turned out to be bad, that's just their problem. Come on, I'm waiting for you at the car." Sophia, beside herself with happiness, rushed to pack her things, while Nancy settled the last questions about the documents. She began to do all of this at once, as soon as she learned about what her parents had done. Of course, the process would still be long, but at least the girl would be with her own sister. They got into the car, and Sophia cried. And her sister comforted her, understanding that she just needed to cry. It's hard to realize that your parents left you for new families. "Let's go home. I rented an apartment here. We'll order a pizza and talk, okay? You and I are going to have a lot to do now. We need to get you into language classes, start getting your passport, and then your citizenship. The last one's the easiest to get because I already have one. I don't know how long it will take, but I'll be around the whole time," she smiled. "Passport?" Sophia asked, not quite knowing what she was talking about. "I live in Orlando, Florida. Naturally, when we finish with the documents, you will come with me, and there we will live together. Don't worry, you'll get the hang of it. I went there and didn't know a single word. There are quite a lot of Spanish speakers there, and there are even more courses for us," she said, smiling at Sophia. "I should have picked you up a long time ago. I didn't think our parents would be such idiots. Come on, let's go. There's nothing to stand around for." Nancy started the car, and they drove downtown. Soon they were in a spacious apartment with a beautiful view of the city. For the first time in a long time, Sophia felt at home. She felt like she was in a place where she was loved. She wasn't afraid to do what she wanted, say what she wanted, and most importantly, she wasn't afraid to laugh anymore. She was happy that life had changed so dramatically. They sat on the couch, ate a huge pizza from a box, and chatted to the measured hum of the TV, which was running in the background. "I'm sorry I didn't pick you up right away. I arrived 3 days ago, and the lawyer handled all the paperwork. Now, I might be gone for another week. You can stay with Mary. You remember Mary. She's the one I made the deal with. But I'll try to arrange everything from here, so I don't have to leave you. Don't worry, Sophia. Everything will change soon. So what if our parents left us? At least we have each other," said Nancy. Sophia smiled at her statement. She understood that her sister was right. After all, she could have left her too, to live abroad and not think about her sister. But she came back for her, and Sophia would forever be grateful to her for that.